All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our Dynamics GP year-end webinar. My name is Drew Colo. I'm a marketing specialist here at Savantis. In just a minute, I'll be handing it over to Janelle Riley, the president and CEO of Savantis, to walk through the Dynamics GP year-end procedures. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to let you know we will be having a Q&A section at the end of this webinar. So if you have a question for Janelle, go ahead and use the chat box in this meeting to ask your question, and we'll have Janelle answer it at the end. If you don't know how to use the chat window, if you look in the bottom left corner of this meeting, you'll see a little chat icon. Go ahead and click that, and you'll be able to type in a question there. Also, this meeting will be recorded, and we will go ahead and send a recording and accompanying documentation to you in the next few days here with this information. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Janelle to get started.
Hi, I'm Janelle Riley with Savantis Technologies. I am the CEO of the company, and I have worked with Dynamics GP for 17 years or so, 17 plus years. And so what I want to do today is do year-end closing procedures and walk through step by step the things you need to do a proper year-end close with Dynamics GP. Let's go ahead and get started. I will also give you some tips and tricks along the way as well to hopefully make your process a little bit easier as you go through year end. So first of all, there is a 2017 year-end update that was just released in November. Every year, Microsoft releases a year-end update, and it has varying things in it. Last year, it actually contained updates to 1099 forms, but this year it does not. This year, it only impacts payroll, which means only payroll users for Dynamics GP have to apply the 2017 year-end update. That update includes some electronic W-2 filing, some various updates to some things on the forms. It applies the ACA updates, and it also does on the depreciation or fixed asset side luxury auto limitation updates, although I do not believe we have any clients that are using that anyway at this time. What that means is these updates should be applied if you have payroll, but if you don't have payroll, there's really no reason for doing it because it's not going to impact anything in your system. So if you are a Savantis Cloud customer, you're using Microsoft Cloud, you get those updates for free. We just install them for you whenever you are ready to do that. And if you are not a cloud customer, we charge for those services. We did send an email in early December to schedule the updates. I believe that of our payroll clients, nearly all of them are scheduled for the week between Christmas and New Year's because it has to happen after your last payroll and prior to your first payroll. So when do we have to close? That's our first question. When is the best time to close Dynamics GP? I get this question all the time, and I have people that actually don't do this, but it's against my recommendations. It should be done as soon as possible after year end. I will tell you that nearly all of our clients are fully closed in Dynamics GP within 5 to 7 business days after the end of the fiscal year. There are actually very few that straggle in after that. So, and it's not that they have everything perfect at that time. It's that they have enough complete to do the close and to move on to the next fiscal year. So if you're a calendar year company, you should be planning to perform the closing procedures between January 6th and January 10th. And then we'll have a few stragglers that follow into the next week. So how does that work? If we are performing the close, how does that whole process work? Well, first of all, one of the recommendations that Microsoft provides is you can enter transactions. Oh, I see an error on here. It should be enter transactions into batches for 2018 before closing 2017, but just don't post those batches until you have closed 2017. What that means is, you don't want to stop your people from doing production of entering sales orders, entering project transactions, doing whatever they have to do, right? You want to just keep working and keep doing production right smack into right into the beginning of the year. But what you do want to do is you want to save all those transactions from 2018 into batches until you've performed the closing procedures for those modules, and then you can go ahead And at that point, you can go ahead and post the batches. So let's say, for example, that you're starting with the inventory module. Let's say that you get to January 4th, and you have gotten to a point where you know all the inventory is correct. The transactions, inventory adjustments, any counts have been completed on January 4th. You know you've posted all the invoices, customer invoices, and you've entered all your receiving transactions. If those three things are complete at January 4th, you should go in and close the inventory module at that point, because then at that point, anything in inventory, any inventory transactions, count transactions, etc., adjustments could actually be posted at that point. Now you get to the point where you've completed all, you know you've looked at AP, for example. Let's do AR, because AR is usually quicker. You get to the point where you know you've posted all your customer invoices, AR is clean, you know that that's ready to go. Now you can close the AR module, and then you can start to post all the AR transactions, and so on and so forth as you work through the modules in the system. Now, one of the questions we get frequently is, how do we do that with AP? One really important thing with AP is make sure you enter all of your vendor invoices as soon as possible, and usually by 12/31, or at least everything that you've got in your stacks and sitting on your desk. Make sure that your AP people have those all entered as soon as possible after 12/31, so that if you have to print a check after January 1st, you can do so because that invoice has already been entered. Then the other important thing to know about payroll, it can be run, but it can't be posted until after you close. So you can still do a payroll on January 2nd or January 3rd or whatever the date ends up being. You can still run that payroll, just don't post it until after you've closed the year. So what happens if I don't actually do that? What happens if I don't close before posting into the new year? All right, let me preface this by saying that I've been doing this for 17 years. I have a lot of clients over the years that have not closed, that have posted transactions into the new year before they performed year-end close. The honest truth is, I have never seen a problem with it in all these years. That being said, Microsoft's instructions clearly state that you should not post any transactions before, or you should not post any transactions before you've closed the prior year. Now, why do they do that? It's because there are a handful of reports and inquiries that the numbers reflected on those are not correct if you go ahead and post before closing the year. Now, I know which reports those are. I also know our client base very well. Very few people actually use those inquiries and reports anyway. So what you have to do, if you're not going to go ahead and follow these procedures as Microsoft recommends, you just have to be aware of what the consequences are. So first of all, the vendor yearly summary inquiry is not going to be accurate. So what that is if you're in a vendor card and there's a button on the bottom of it and it's a summary inquiry, you can go ahead and pull up and it'll show all your vendor transactions for that fiscal year and the total of all current year transactions and prior year transactions, like a total of what you've paid that vendor. Well, the year-end closing procedure takes those tables and actually closes those out and actually resets that to zero. So let's say last year I paid a vendor $100,000 and this year I'm paying a vendor $50,000. If I were to go ahead and close that module, let's say in March of 2018, part of that $50,000, maybe 10,000 of it, is going to actually show up in 2017 numbers, not in 2018 numbers. So you just have to understand the consequences of those actions and understand that if that closing procedure isn't properly executed after closing the year, and that the posting isn't postponed, that will be impacted. Similarly, on the customer side, a summary inquiry, the yearly summary inquiry are going to be inaccurate, and a few annual inventory reports, such as the inventory turnover report. It's going to calculate the turnover for the year. It doesn't reset that. So in a nutshell, running year-end close before posting transactions into 2018 is not critical, but it will make some reports and inquiries more accurate and less confusing if you follow the procedure. The numbers on your financial statements will not be impacted. Your subsidiary ledgers themselves will not be impacted, and the numbers will be correct on those regardless. So just so you understand that. What if I don't have solid financial statements fast enough to go ahead and perform the close? So the big one I get a lot of times is the audit. My audit's not completed yet. Or I don't have my financial statements completely nailed down because I have a couple of accruals I've still got it booked. Okay, so what you would do is you'll close each GP module as the work is completed. You just have to do it in this order. As I described at the beginning of this webinar, when you know inventory is right, go ahead and close inventory. Just get it done, right? When you know receivables is right, then go ahead and close receivables. And when you know payables right, go ahead and close payables. If you think about it, inventory, receivables, payables are among the largest things that our clients have to deal with. So if you can get those 3 modules closed, you can be posting transactions into the next year, cleanly already very quickly after year end. Then after that, you can do the same thing with fixed assets, project accounting, and GL. And in a moment, I'm going to go through one by one what you need to do to close each of those modules. What if I have to complete my audit yet? Doesn't have any impact. Audits should not impact your year-end close. I cannot emphasize that strongly enough because I hear it every year. My audit's not complete, so I can't close the GL. That is actually not true and not a good practice. GP is excellent at post-closing adjustments. So what that means is, let's say that I went through the whole closing process on January 10th. On February 15th, my auditors come back with an adjustment. I've got to book an accrual adjustment, and it's on a GL level. All I do is just go in, open that fiscal period, enter the GL adjustment, post it, close the fiscal period back up, I'm done. What the system is going to do behind the scenes is it'll say, okay, I'm going to debit an expense. I'm going to credit an accrual account just like they told me to. Oh, whoops, we're closed for the year. Okay, then I'm going to debit the accrual account. I'm going to credit my, I'm going to clear out the accrual account against retained earnings and then go ahead and do that entry immediately afterwards. So everything cleans through the system and flows through retained earnings as it should. So I can't emphasize this enough. Do not hold off to close your GL until you have an audit or your last adjustments because it has no impact whatsoever. But what it will do is make management reporter and FRX financial statements a lot more difficult to work with. It'll make it more difficult to balance your balance sheet accounts because they haven't rolled forward the balances on the balance sheet. It's just not a good idea to hold that back. So what do I do to prepare for year-end close? What are my best practices? First thing I got to do is order my 1099s and W-2s. Then I complete a balance sheet close. I do my month-end routines and I run check links. Those are the 4 things I need to do. So let me go through that pretty quickly. First of all, for ordering 1099s and W-2s, I suspect that most people on this webinar have already done so, but I will tell you Deluxe is pretty quick, so you can get those in very quickly yet if you order right now. The preferred provider for Microsoft Dynamics is actually Deluxe. And you can email mary.schaefer@savantis.com if you need additional instructions. But those of you who are our existing clients, you would have received an email on this, I believe in November, with the instructions for going ahead and purchasing those forms. The first step I've got to do once I've got ready to start doing my year end is to go ahead and perform a balance sheet close. What I mean by balance sheet close is not a physical close in the system, but to verify each of my balance sheet accounts and make sure that they're all correct. So, and this should be completed honestly every single month end and should be nailed down every month end. So it's not something that you should be doing just at year end. But in theory, if you can think about it, the concept between the balance sheet for the balance sheet close is this. My assets, as we all know, equals liabilities plus prior year retained earnings plus current year income. Okay, if I can go through every line on my balance sheet, every asset, and identify and clearly document what the correct balance in each one of those accounts are, and I can do the same thing on liabilities, and I know what my prior year retained earnings was because most likely it's audited or reviewed. The only number in this equation that I don't know is current year income. What that means is I don't even need to look at my P&L to know what my net income is. All I need to do is go through every single line on my balance sheet, independently verify each one of those items, and the concurrent year income will roll out from that. So that's another thing I really emphasize. Focus on the balance sheet. Do not focus on the P&L because that's not really as material as what you're looking at in the balance sheet. If you have questions on that, all of our consultants know how this process is supposed to work and they can assist you with it. We also have some, sample reports that you can use to support your balance sheet balances. For example, what report do you run to support, your bank rec? What report do you run to support your inventory balances, your accrued payables balances, all of your WIP balances, all of those types of things. And I believe that Drew has already sent that out to the prior webinar attendees, and he'll send that out again today so that you'll have what reports to run to verify those balance sheet accounts. So this next thing I have to do is I need to run my month-end routines. Again, month-end routines. This is something that should happen every month. I have to emphasize that month-end closes are extremely important. I don't recommend that you do quarter-end closes even. I think that you should do month-end closes. If your finance department, if everyone in your finance department is accustomed to doing a full balance sheet month-end close, full routines for month-end close, what happens is when you get to year end, it's pretty much a non-event. Like it's just another month end, and you don't have people that are really stressed out around the holidays because they have a calendar year end, or in the summer because you have a fiscal year end of June 30th. It makes year end close so much easier if you've done all of your procedures every month end. So the month-end routines in the system that you need to run are things like aging accounts receivable, running paid transaction removal routine in the sales module, running remove the completed POs routine in the purchasing module, and reconciles on every single module. All of those things at a minimum should be run every month end. In addition, if you have project accounting, you should be running full reconciles on project accounting every month end. And you should also run check links on project accounting fully on every month end. I realize it's a burden administratively because these types of procedures have to happen when there's nobody in the system, but you have so many less issues, problems in the tables, support requests with us because something doesn't work properly. It's actually going to save you money in the end if you run these routines every single month end. That being said, we're talking about year end right now. You have to definitely do these things for year end. Okay, if you have any questions on these, you're welcome to contact your managing consultant or whoever you're working with here, or just email support@savantis.com and we'll help you with these things. And then the last step is to run check links. Let me explain what a couple of these procedures are. So the routine I just described was reconcile. That was the one that I had at the month end that you should always do at month end. Reconciles, what they do, the best way to describe what reconciles do is put things in the proper buckets. So simple example, accounts receivable. So maybe you print your aged accounts receivables list and you look at it and you're like, dang, there's a transaction. It's 3 months old, but it's actually not showing up in the 90-day bucket. It's actually showing up in the 60-day bucket. I don't understand why it's doing that. What's happened is there's something in the system that there was maybe an issue when somebody was posting, or something happened that put it into the 60-day bucket, and it's not allowing itself, maybe a calculation of a date, to jump into the 90-day bucket where it belongs. So what you do is if you run the reconcile utility for accounts receivable, it actually goes and recalculates all those dates and puts it in the right spot. So that's what reconciles do. So it's bucketing, or similarly inventory, something that's allocated that shouldn't be allocated, etc. Or AP in the correct buckets for those things, or project accounting that somehow it's like the billing amount or the revenue recognition amount isn't tying out properly. That's what reconciles fix. What check links does is goes even deeper than that. It looks at links between each of the modules, not just within the one module. So let's say you're doing an inventory transaction, you do a receiving transaction, receiving runs through purchasing, and then the item goes into inventory module, and then the item goes into as an addition to inventory, and then once that's posted, it actually runs through and goes into the GL. What check links does is check the links to make sure that whatever received actually went into inventory, whatever went into inventory actually created the GL batch. So every year end, we recommend running the check links because it will clear up all of those issues that are in the system. Here's the tricky part of it. You have to have system level security to do it. And those of you who are on Azure, we actually recommend you just have us do it for you. So if you have your own on-premise server, which we don't have very many of those left anymore, but if you still have your own on-premise server, you can go ahead and run the check links yourself. You just have to remember to do a backup first. If you're on Azure, you should go ahead and email support@savantis.com And we will go ahead and perform the checklinks for you at a time and schedule at a time when nobody is in the system, such as an evening or a weekend or whatever, and we'll run that process for you and let you know the results. So kind of a long story, but I wanted to make sure you understood what those processes are doing. So, and then the last thing you do with each one of them is close the fiscal periods. And I would guess that almost everybody on this call has closed fiscal periods. It's in administration, company, fiscal periods. It does not physically do anything in the system, no GL impacts, no transactional impacts. The only thing it does is it marks a box that basically locks that module down so that nobody can accidentally post backwards into the year that I'm about to close. So let's go specifically through the year-end closing procedures on a module by module basis. So the modules should be closed in the following order: payroll, inventory, receivables, payables, fixed assets, analytical accounting, project accounting, and GL. Now, the reason it says optional next to payroll is there are a lot of people that don't have payroll, so that's optional if you have payroll. The other two for me, or the other one for me to mention to you, is project accounting. Project accounting doesn't actually have a physical closing procedure, but I do recommend you go through that module as part of the reconciles process, and I'll tell you what I recommend you do in project accounting, even though it doesn't have a formal closing process. So my best practices for year-end closing. First of all, if you were to read Microsoft's instructions, if you were to go say on Customer Source and you were to download the instructions for year-end close from Microsoft, you would see that you're supposed to run, I don't even know how many backups. By the time you go through all these modules, it could be 20 of them. So the important thing to know about backups is, Microsoft is writing the procedures this way because they want to reduce liability, and because there are many extremely large clients that have maybe even as many as thousands of users, and they really do have to run that many backups in between, in between closing procedures. But because we specialize in the mid-sized, small to mid-sized business market, our clients don't typically, there are only a handful of them that are that large that need to do those multiple backups during year-end close. The rest of you don't need to worry about that. All you need to do is think about this. If I run this procedure in year-end close and something goes horribly wrong, and I have to restore from my last backup, how much work would it be for me to recreate it? So for example, I'll give you an example. So let's say that you're a financial services company or medical or somebody like that doesn't have inventory. Maybe you just have some services parts, but that's it. Very few. I run a backup. I know that a company that does not have a lot of inventory and also does not have a lot of a high volume of transactions, to close inventory, AR, AP is actually really quick. The three of those together for the average company is going to be even in GL included, is going to be less than an hour, most likely. Okay, so if I do a backup at the beginning and I get all the way through 1 hour later and something goes horribly wrong and I have to revert to my backup, I lost 1 hour of time, okay? But if I had to run backups every time they told me to, I probably spent 3 hours doing backups to save myself 1 hour potentially. Realistically, that's not going to happen in the future. So what you want to do is do it only when you don't have time to revert. The other thing that's important, if you are on an on-premise implementation, again, this doesn't apply to those of you on Azure because we take care of it all for you. You're going to want to delete those backups as soon as you're sure the closing is successful, because you'll be eating up some of your drive space. The second best practice to be aware of if you were to go through these procedures is printing reports. So specifically at the end of printing AR and AP, at the end of closing AR and AP, a report automatically pops up for you. Those reports are ridiculously long. They can be thousands and thousands of pages depending upon the volume of transactions. It can be tens of thousands of pages for many of our clients. So these closing instructions, at least for the 18 years I've been involved in GP, have not changed by Microsoft. So let's rewind back to the 1990s. We did print out all this stuff. Why? Because you didn't have the cloud. You didn't have all the security of the cloud. You were concerned, what if something went horribly wrong and my server crashes and everything is gone and I need to somehow get back to that? I don't even know. And I have no backups from ever. So, we would print those things out just as a security thing. Fast forward to 2017, 2018, that's not necessary anymore. We have 45 days of backups. We have so much security sitting on our servers now. It's not necessary. You can go back and get anything you want. We're just not in the same world anymore. So to waste all that paper, it's just, there's no point in it. And so I say, print them at your peril. Why? Because you're going to use reams of paper for no reason. There is one other best practice for year-end close that I recommend, and it doesn't have any impact on the system at all, but it's a trick. Change your system date before you start close. Change your system date to 12/31/2017, assuming your calendar year end. And you'll see it as you start to run it if you haven't done this before. But the system, when you run, say, accounts receivable close, it actually says last close date on that window for future queries. And that date that's on there comes from the system date. If you put 12/31/17, 2017 on your system date, it'll take that date and put it in there, and it'll just be less confusing for you in the future. Not necessary, but it's something you can do. So let's go now module through module. Remember, he had the list of all the modules of what we needed to close in which order. The first one on that list was payroll. So payroll close can be run anytime after your last 2017 check run. And let's see, we are on, what date is it today, the 14th? Okay, we have a number of clients that are going to be running their last payroll on the 15th, so they'll already be done for the year. And we have some that will be running payrolls yet on the 29th. But you can only run close after that last check run. There are many of our clients that are on bi-weeklies that their last payroll will be the 29th of December. You cannot run payroll close until after that is complete. And you also need to do it before your first payroll of the next year. So those of you on the 29th, I don't have a calendar in front of me, but it seems like it's around what, the 12th, 13th, whatever it is, that you are going to be running your next payroll. You have to run year-end close between those two dates, your last one and your first one. I have something in here. If you have payroll, make sure you email support@savannahs.com and you schedule year-end updates. I just talked to Christina a few minutes ago, and she said that almost everybody has already responded to that. But we've got to make sure, because we've got to hit everybody between all of their, final payrolls and their first payrolls. We have a lot of scheduling to do because we got a lot of people we run our updates for. We got to make sure we get those scheduled for you so we can make sure that you know what time it's going to happen, and for us to make sure that we can squeeze it in between the holidays and everything like that. Another important closing procedure, important thing to remember when closing payroll is to run all your monthly and quarterly reports for 2017 before you close. It just makes things easier for you if you've got all that run and taken care of prior to year-end close, but not necessary. So if you need to, you can hold off. Let's go to the second module, is inventory. So inventory is essentially, unless you have payroll, the first module you're going to close every single year. It also happens to be the one you usually clean up pretty quickly after year end, so it usually can be closed fairly rapidly after year end. So some of the things you're going to want to do is reconcile your inventory quantities before you close, perform a physical count, remove your discontinued items, and then remember there are no reports. I am going to jump ahead here. Yeah, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that. I couldn't remember if I had another slide. So what you're going to do with inventory is you're going to want to reconcile your inventory quantities. Remember earlier in this session that I talked about reconciles and the procedures for reconciles of each module in GP. Okay, in inventory routines, there's something called, reconcile, or it might be under, and it's called reconcile inventory. What that does in the context of inventory is it puts things in the proper buckets, which is extremely important for inventory counts. Reconciling will go ahead and make sure that you've got your buckets for inventory, like what's been allocated and what's been fulfilled. It'll go ahead and recalculate and make sure that the quantity that's allocated is the correct amount. If your inventory people go and frequently say, you know what, I'm looking at this, it says that I got quantity 10 allocated to this, but when I go in and look at my sales orders, there's nothing allocated to a sales order. I don't understand. This is what fixes it. For another reason, I say you should be doing this before year-end close, reconciling inventory quantities. Actually, more so than that, if you have a fair number of inventory transactions, you should be doing it at least every month, and many of our clients need to do it every week. So just be aware, this should be a common occurrence for you to do those inventory quantity reconciles. Second thing you want to do is, of course, perform your physical counts, go ahead and perform your adjustments and all of that. When you go in to go ahead physically run year-end close, the inventory year-end close, there's going to be a couple of boxes that are options for you. The one that I recommend that you mark, not any of the others, is called Remove Discontinued Items. If you mark that box on the inventory close, removing discontinued items, what's going to happen is it's going to take those out of the open tables and put them into history. What does that do? You can still query on it. You can still see all the inventory, transactions. You can still see, what was received, that it was received on transactions. You can see that it was sold on invoices, but you just can't do anything else with those items. You can't work with them anymore. But what it does do is really help your inventory people get control of the inventory so you don't have so many items to deal with. Or the next time you run inventory reconciles, it doesn't have to go through all those. It just skips them and says, oh, those are closed out and discontinued. We don't need to do that anymore. On an aside note, make sure that as an inventory, as you go through your inventory, make sure you are discontinuing items. That should be happening on a regular basis. Your inventory people, your people who are in charge of inventory should be discontinuing items continuously and making sure that everything gets out of the system as it should. And again, if you have questions on any of these things, you're welcome to email support@savannas.com. We'll go ahead and give you instruction and advice on this. And then the last thing when you run inventory close that's just like strange is you go ahead, you have the window up there. It's just a little window that says inventory close. It lets you remove discontinued items and you hit the button OK or process or whatever it is, and it goes and runs. Then you sit there and you watch it. That's it. There's nothing. It's just still sitting there. What's weird about inventory close is nothing prints for inventory close. It just like ends. So just don't freak out about it because it is very confusing. There is a trick in GP. If you're ever looking at something going, did it finish? Is this done? Is it still running? Is it hung up? Is it stuck? If you go into the GP logo in the upper left corner of your screen and you view the process monitor, it'll tell you if it's actually done. That's a really handy thing for power users. When you're thinking that something is hung up, you can look at that process monitor. Receivables is the next thing you close. So first inventory, next receivables. Once again, best practice, make sure you run reconciles on accounts receivable. That runs very quickly. Then you should also remove paid transaction, perform the paid transaction removal utility. If you have questions about that, please ask. And then my last thing is related to the reports. Don't print it. It's huge. You're not going to get any value out of it. You're going to put it in a stack somewhere as a fire hazard, and you're never going to look at it again. I guarantee it. So just don't do it. Payables. That's the next module. The important thing to remember is don't post any AP transactions until you have closed AP. This is actually more important than other options, modules to be careful with. Because I do frequently have clients that want to go do a quick inquiry. Their boss will ask them to go pull up, can you just let me know how much I paid to this vendor last year and how much I paid to him this year? Well, those queries won't be right if those inquiries or those summary inquiries will not be correct if you post the transactions prior to close, as we described earlier. So I really do recommend doing that. Fiscal year companies, the thing to know if your fiscal year is you actually have to do 2 closes a year. One, your fiscal year close, and one, your calendar year close, because the calendar year close is what's going to generate your 1099s. So you actually have to do both of them. For those of you that are calendar year, there's an option that just says mark both, and you just close both at the same time. Another important thing to know is 1099s can be edited. The 1099 features in GP are quite good. It's really clean, really smooth. People really don't have problems with it other than the numbers come out. Maybe there's an error in the system, and I'll explain that in a minute, what they do with that. And then the last step after you've closed AP and AR is you can close the tax year. And why do you do that? To make sure that your taxes are all up to date for sales and use tax. The next module is fixed assets close. This close is mandatory. Very important that you complete the close on this before you enter transactions into the next year. Because actually your depreciation won't be right if you haven't closed properly. So this one, actually, it's mandatory that you complete it before and perform close before you start the next year. And then the other thing that's important to know is that payables should be closed before closing fixed assets. Why? Because a lot of times AP transactions actually feed into fixed assets because you purchased an asset and you got to transfer it into fixed assets. So if you don't do AP first, you're going to miss it, and then fixed assets won't be right. Next thing is if you're doing fixed assets, we do recommend that you print all your required reports, like for audit and reconciliations and such, that you do it prior to doing the close. Why? Because some of those reports are not accessible after close. So just to be safe, I recommend print everything you need, get your fixed assets nailed down, whatever you got to give to your auditors, your tax people, whatever, get that done before you close. And there is in GP 2015 and later, which nearly all of our clients are on 2015 or later now anyway, there is a new year-end closing report that actually works really well for audit. So just so you know, you can print that when you perform the close. It'll just pop up and ask you to print it. The next one is project accounting. Project accounting, as I mentioned earlier, does not have any specified year-end procedures. However, there are a couple of things that you really should do with project accounting. And this actually, one is we talked about the reconciles. It's at Project Utilities PA Reconcile. That should be done though every month end. And you may have to run it multiple times. So for those of you who are project accounting people, you go into the utilities area there will be a bunch of different options to reconcile. Reconciling billings, reconciling, revenue recognition transactions, earnings statements, etc. You'll want to reconcile every single one of those, and you'll want to reconcile them until there is 0 errors, which means you may have to reconcile them multiple times. Because what it'll do is it'll go through, let's say it's in the billing area, it'll go through all the bills and it'll reconcile it. Now I go ahead and I do the revenue recognition one, and I go ahead and run that and to fix that. Well, then I go back and run bill again. It may have cleared something up on the billing since then, but I have to actually go ahead and fix that in revenue recognition again as well. So just run it till there are no errors. And then the second thing I really recommend is run project accounting check links before you close. And again, this one may require multiple runs because there are so many things that pop up in project accounting. There's so many links with other modules. It's integrated with GL, AR, AP, payroll. I mean, it's like all inventory. It's all over the place. So there's so many links in that it can take a long time to go ahead and run that and run those check links. Actually, and the check links as a recommendation, I believe that it should be run every month end, not just at year end, because it clears up so many things. It makes it so much easier for your people that are, for your project admin people that are running transactions through. And the last one out of all of it is, of course, general ledger. There are a couple special best practices with general ledger that I highly recommend. First of all, print an account list before you close and verify that the posting type of balance sheet or P&L is correct. So you know how you go to an accounting into accounts, general ledger financial accounts, and you pull up an account or you're setting up a new account, how it has an option between balance sheet and income statement. That option on there is what tells the system what type of account you have, so that when you run year-end close, it knows what to close to retained earnings. So it's going to find everything that you've identified as an income statement account, and it's going to go ahead and close that to retained earnings, and every balance sheet account it's going to not close to retained earnings. So you can imagine if you got one of those off, that you would actually not have a proper close. I will hit that in a moment. You can undo it, but still better to avoid it altogether. Just print out your account list, verify that all your income statement accounts are income statement, and that your balance sheet are balance sheet. And if you have any variable or fixed allocation accounts, that those are also balance sheet, and then you're good to go. So what does GL Close do? The income statement accounts, as I described, will close to retained earnings, and the balance sheet accounts will roll forward. Secondly, the year-to-date balances in GL are updated. So like if you were to go to and look at year-to-dates on your summaries, etc., it would actually have all the GL balances correct. And then lastly, your management reporter reports are going to roll forward to the new year. So all of those things are really important with GL Close, and that's why it's so important that you close GL as soon as possible, even if you haven't posted every GL adjustment, even if you haven't had an audit. And then once you're all done, the last thing you should do is run SQL database maintenance, and you can email support@savantis.com. We'll do that for you. If you are an Azure or a hosted customer, on Microsoft Cloud, it's free. You just got to let us know. We'll schedule it. We'll do it for you. If you're on premise yet, you do have to pay for that, but it usually doesn't take very long. And then if you're on premise, you need to make a permanent backup and store it in a secure location. If you're not on premise, if you're on the Microsoft Cloud, you have backups, and so that shouldn't be an issue for you. However, if you do, for some reason, want to, we can make a backup for you and put it up on an FTP site for your IT people so that they can store it somewhere if you'd like. You just have to let us know. So with that, I did that in about 45 minutes. We're now to a point where we can talk through some of the frequently asked questions that we have, and then after that, we'll do a Q&A. So that is the whole procedure and kind of my advice as we go through. I've provided plenty of advice. Let's talk about some frequently asked questions. So I performed my year-end close for AP, and I am producing my 1099s, and I'm looking, I'm like, wait a second, some of those payments that I made in early 2017 aren't showing up on the vendor's 1099. What the heck happened? Most likely what happened was that your AP person, no fault of theirs, it just happens. They went ahead and created a new vendor and went ahead and wrote them a check in January. And then about February, they're like, dang. I forgot to go ahead and set them up as a 1099 vendor, because you have to mark on the vendor card that they're a 1099 vendor. Shoot, I forgot to do that. And then they go mark it. And then from there on, they just run AP for the rest of the year. Well, what happened was that box wasn't marked on their first check run they did to that vendor in January, but it wasn't all the rest. So only February through December payments are going to show up on the 1099. January doesn't. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is you can easily fix that, because there's a utility to make 1099 adjustments. And you can manually adjust the 1099s to whatever you need to make them correct. So it's not difficult to take care of. It's just, I should warn you that you should review and validate the 1099 numbers, because stuff like that really does happen, and it keeps you from having 1099 issues going forward. What happens if I want to issue a check on January 2nd, but I haven't closed AP yet? Nothing wrong with that. Go ahead, run your select checks, or actually run your manual, whatever you have to do. Run the check transaction, print it out, send the check off. Just don't post that transaction until after you finish close. So you can still do it, you just can't post it. All right, next one. I ran payroll year-end close, and then I went to print my 941, and it's all zeros. This one actually gives people heart attacks. I'll say that. It's actually just a GP thing. And if you email support@savantis.com, someone's going to answer you right away. They know the answer to this one, which is that 941 report. When you run the 941 report each quarter, the system figures out which year you're in based on your system date. So if I want to print out my payroll 941 report for Q4 2017, if I have a 2017 date on there, it'll print Q4 2017. But if I have my system date is 12/31/2018, it'll do Q4 2018. So my trick is I change my system date Oh, I put 2016 on there. It should be 2017. I changed my system date to a 2017 date, and the report runs as it should. So it's a quick fix, just kind of gives you a heart attack for a moment. Next one. When I try to close the GL, I get an error message that a single-use batch or quick journal has not been posted. Help. That one's actually kind of scary, but it's really not a problem at all. It just happens probably certainly more than 50% of the time we try to close, maybe 80%. It happens a lot. So what that means is that all the system is trying to tell you is you still have something in the system, some transactions that are dated 2017. I'm looking at that as a system going, how can you close 2017 when you have unposted transactions from 2017? Doesn't make any sense to me. So what the system is popping up and warning you of is you have an issue here and you really should take care of it because I have a concern that you're going to close before you've posted all your 2017 transactions. The system, if you click continue on this, will allow you to override and close anyway. Not my recommendation. It's not how I do it. I don't like that message either. It is a warning for a reason. It's trying to tell me there's something not right. What I really recommend you do is go ahead and make sure you've posted all your 2017 batches, obviously, because that's what it's for. But then if there's something you know you're not going to post, change the date to 2018. Just even go through your sales orders or your invoices in the system and make 2018 dates on them. Because that way you know and you verified that everything that truly should have posted to 2017 posted to 2017, and everything that truly belongs in 2018 you post to 2018. Now this will apply throughout the system, including quick journal entries, which not many people use, but if you do, you need to go ahead and change the date and make it 2018 date on the quick journals as well. Does everyone need to be out before I do the close? Yeah, for sure, and definitely a backup. And I close the year in the GL. Is there a way to undo it? Yes. If you're GP 2013 R2 and later, which I believe nearly all of our clients are at this point, you can go into the year-end closing routine window, and there's a button that says reverse historical year. It'll be reopened as if it was never closed in the first place. It's actually really slick and really fast. I do recommend a backup first, but beyond that, just go for it because you can just undo it and then make whatever adjustments you need to make and then go ahead and reclose it. And can Savannah's help me with close? Yeah, definitely. Most of our clients, honestly, do have us do the close with them. Why? Because as I described way early in this webinar, a lot of our clients, such as medicals, different industries such as medical or financial services or those type, they don't have inventory. Or they may have very little project accounting. Really, they're using the system for mostly ARAP, GL, that type of thing. Their closes are very, very quick. Even clients that have, a fair amount of inventory and a lot of projects, their closes are actually quite quick as well. And so many of our clients, rather than be concerned they're going to make a mistake or read a 20-page manual, which we're about to email you after this and upload to you after this so that you can follow the instructions, they'll just get one of our consultants on the line, and then one of our staff here will just go through with them and actually perform the close with them. We do them all the time, so it's easy for us to remember the steps. You do it once a year, it's a lot harder for you than it is for us. So it saves you a lot of time and anxiety. If you want it, email support@savannahs.com. You schedule a time with us. We'll go ahead and make sure you have a backup first, and we'll just walk you right through the process. All right, I've got 10 minutes to spare yet. And so what I'd like to do right now is open it up for Q&A. Maybe I'll turn the mic over to Drew at this point. Are you there, Drew?
Yep. Thanks, Janelle. So we've had a few questions throughout the presentation that we have all had answers to. So if you do have another question for Janelle, feel free to type it in the chat box now. We'll just stay here a couple minutes and wait for questions. As a reminder, Janelle mentioned it earlier, we will be sending an email in the next day or so with full instructions for all the procedures you need to do to close the year in Dynamics GP, as well as a full recording of this presentation. So you can go back and refer to that as well.
You know, I am seeing a few questions about backups and such. Yeah, we do 40, we keep 45 days of backups for you. It's way more than you have with an on-premise system. What that means is we can, and many of our larger clients, we actually have multiple backups during the day. As well. And so we have a lot of backups. If you're on the cloud version of GP, all of that is included. There are no additional costs that are performed. You know, no, we don't charge you anything additional for backups. The nightly backups, I see there's a question from Melissa on that. What time are they usually complete? That depends upon your particular scenario. We actually have a procedure that runs in the middle of the night. If you're interested to find out when yours is scheduled, specifically, you can email support@savantis.com and one of our technical people will get back to you with it. But yeah, that's all I can tell you with that because I don't know what time everybody is. So I assume everyone does not have to be out of the system. Actually, Rick, I hate to tell you this, they do. Users do have to be out of the system to run month-end routines, but that depends on which routine, okay? So if you're running the month-end routine for, let's say you're doing, you know, like you're aging your receivables, or you're removing completed POs. Wait, I should step back on that one. Mary may have to answer that one. Many of these procedures, particularly the reconciles, you do need people to be out of the system to do it. And for sure, when you do check links, you do. So we have to have a full backup, and then we run check links. So yes, that is a challenge, particularly inventory. So if you're a company that has a lot, for all of our clients that have a lot of inventory and you know, they may have hundreds or thousands or millions of items, it'll take a long time to run a reconcile of inventory. And everyone has to be out during that time. So what I usually recommend you doing is picking somebody who comes in early in the morning, going ahead and having them, because you have a fresh backup overnight anyway, and they just come in and start the reconcile and let it run when they first come in. Or alternatively, they a lot of times will pop in on Saturday morning, they'll just log in remotely or whatever on Saturday morning, and then just go ahead and start it and let it run over the weekend. So just so you know that, and we'll run it for you as well. So some of the routines you don't need to, most of them you do. Mary, for removing completed POs, you don't need to be out, right? I'm trying to think what else. I know she'll know the answer to that. Yep, so, but the reconciles are really important, so. Looks like, it sounds like Mary has responded to much of these. Yep, it looks like we've had those answers. Okay, thanks, Mary. Yeah, so what she's saying is if you want to run the remove completed POs, everybody doesn't have to be out, but you can't be doing a receiving transaction at that moment. Great. Somebody also asked about how long does it take to run the reconcile on inventory items? It depends on how many you have, honestly. I mean, we have a couple clients that have tens of millions of transactions. You know, theirs will take, you know, an entire weekend to run. If you don't have a ton of transactions, it could get done in, you know, 30 minutes. It could be 2 hours. It also depends on how often you're running reconciles. Because if you're running them regularly, a lot of stuff's cleaned up. But if you're not running them regularly, then it's got to go clean up everything at one time, and it takes a lot longer. Do we have any other questions? Looks like we've got these pretty well handled. These were good questions.
If you have any further questions that you can't think of right now, but maybe think of later, go ahead and send an email to support@savantis.com, and our technical team will be able to help you out. Give it another minute or so for any last questions.
We covered an awful lot during this. And I have a lot of opinions on it since I've been doing it for so long. So if you have anything, I'm cool with that.
All right. I think we're good to wrap up here. So go ahead and be on the lookout for an email from us with all the documentation and the recording, and send any further requests to support@savantis.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.